Hello and welcome to another episode of Literary Liberation Podcast. Today we will be discussing, analyzing, and reviewing The Magician's Daughter by H.G. Parry. Chris and I have adopted a Palestinian family that is currently still stuck in Gaza. Mohammed's neighborhood was bombed and killed 22 members of his family, leaving him responsible for his 4 younger siblings who were pulled from the rubble. We have their families' GoFundMe link in the description, and they are very close to their goal. Please donate below. Don't forget there's a link below to sign up for our free newsletter where you can get more information and updates about us and the podcast. For more content outside of the podcast, please check out our Instagram and TikTok at Literary Liberation and Twitter at LitLibPodcast. I'm your co-host Mariah, and you can find me at Hungry Rye on all social media platforms.
And I'm your co-host Kristen. You can find me at KRXXTXN on all social media platforms.
So, this is a book I knew literally nothing about. This is it. Kristen had suggested reading this from a video that Kristen was recording for
I didn't pick
YouTube.
it. You picked it.
Yeah, I picked it, but because it was in the list of things that you should read for your YouTube video or whatever
Yes.
that you were working
But
on.
the main reason why I got picked, 'cause we were originally going to do a different book. We ended up picking it because you wanted to do something lighter this week.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of really heavy, darker books because of like Halloween, whatnot, and we have another one coming at the end of this month as well that is like more serious. So I thought it might be nice to break up some of it by having a lighter, cozy fantasy. And Kristen said that we could probably have a really good conversation about some of the plots, or not the plots, like the politics of this book. The politics of this book were pretty solid. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So that's why we picked it. It's not a super, like, I don't think it's a book talk book.
Not that I've
I've
seen.
never seen it.
I got recommended it to me by the Barnes and Noble employee because I was like, well, I went to Barnes and Noble because my Cricket Kingdom copy that I originally had got something spilled all over it, so I had to get a new copy. And I was going, and it was on like the buy one get one 50% off table, and like I was just like in a headspace where I couldn't find a single book that was appealing to me that was also buy one get one half. And then the Barnes and Noble employee ended up recommending me this one because they heard that it was very similar to like the Grishaverse and stuff like that, which is like, as you can tell from behind me, like my favorite series. So I was like, okay, I'll pick it up. And that was probably about 2 years ago at this point when I got it. So, and I finally ended up reading it this year. And I do think the Barnes and Noble employee was spitting. They do know what they're talking about. Hope they still work there. Because it wasn't even one of the typical Barnes and Noble I go to. It was a different one. Because they
So
were the only
trust your local Barnes & Noble employee. They may have very good recommendations.
Yeah. I mean, I would hope so, because like that's what they do. And like I don't know. I feel like it's very hard. Like I feel like I'm terrible at giving recommendations. Like if you like this, like I'd be like, I know what I like, you know?
Yeah, it can be hard to find books with the same theme, and I think as like we both have read all of the Grishaverse. Actually Kristen has read more because there's even other little
Like
smaller pamphlets
mini
and graphic novels and stuff that are part of the Grishaverse that Lee Bardugo wrote. Like we have already reviewed all the books, and we read Chris and I reviewed The Familiar, also by Lee Bardugo. So like, we're very familiar with Lee Bardugo's writing, and when we're saying like this and what the Barnes and Noble employee said about this book being very like Grishaverse-esque, it does like play into that. You can tell like the writing is very similar, magic system and like politics are pretty similar, I would think.
Mhm. Yeah, I can agree. I mean, I think this one's much lower stakes, and I do think that The Magician's Daughter feels more for like a younger audience than Six of Crows or King of Scars, specifically those duologies. But I do think it's probably about the same age as like the Shadow and Bone trilogy, because I do think like the Six of Crows and King of Scars duologies are a little bit more mature.
Yeah, even if you want to like get your kid into reading like fantasy, I think you could probably start with this one and then get them into the Shadow and Bone trilogy because I just think this one is a little bit more juvenile. Like in middle school, I probably would have ate this up.
It's also like a single book too, so if you're not looking for something that's super high stakes and like at least like with the Grishaverse like main trilogy, Shadow and Bone, like it is very high stakes. All of their novels are very high stakes, where this is a lot more like down to earth, realistic ish feeling with some elements of high stakes because it is fantasy.
And it's one of those books that if you read it with like your kid that's like maybe like a preteen or a teenager, I think that you can get enjoyment because both Kristen and I are adults and we both
Yeah.
did have like a good pleasant time reading it.
It's not a very popular book. It's got 3.99 stars on Goodreads, so 4 stars out of 8K reviews. I rounded up. It was like 7,000 something. But I mean, so relatively it does have good reviews comparatively with only 8,000 reviews, but I think it should be more people reviewing it cuz I do think it is very sweet, heartwarming, like lighthearted, inspiring like fantasy sort of vibe.
Yeah, this is the first fantasy book I've read since Between Two Fires, I think. So it was a very like different change of pace going from like a dark medieval fantasy to like a more like cozy fantasy. Just like
Mhm.
seeing how like this story plays out, the plot lines and whatnot. It's very different just to see how vast the genre of fantasy is, and we haven't really touched on anything that's just kind of nice to read.
And one thing about this fantasy is that even though it is fantasy, it is based more in reality too. Like versus like completely divulging into like a whole fantastical world. It is still like the main island is like in Ireland specifically, so there are like Irish characters and stuff. And I heard like the audiobook like narrator has like a really good Irish accent that they narrate throughout the book. So if that's something you're into, but I don't think it's not super like you don't have to be a fantasy reader to be able to get into this, I think. I think it's a very good like good beginner opening fantasy for readers.
Yeah, it's not high fantasy where it's like so divorced from reality because it is on Goodreads, I think, labeled as historical fiction as well
Yeah.
because it's the time period it's set in. So you
It's set in
have
the
those
early
elements. Now,
1900s.
it's not trying to do some sort of historical retelling to our knowledge. Like there is some
No.
like common traits with how like Irish people feel about British people, which is like understandable. So those are included, but not like actual historical events that are
Yeah.
relevant that we're evaluating. This isn't like told from like those perspectives. This is just like this is the time setting, the locations, so that there's no big world building really. It's kind of like how like Harry Potter is set in England,
Yes.
but also like its own world. You know, like there's still some common places that you can reference, but you wouldn't call that like it's not like historic or like contemporary fantasy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. I don't know if that's helping.
What the book is specifically about, you basically follow Biddy who was orphaned as a baby. She basically washed up on this magical island as a child, and a magician lives on this island named Rowan, which is like the magic keepers in this world, and he basically adopts Biddy with his uh familiar Hutch and Croft, who's a major character as well, and they end up raising Biddy up until she's, I believe, 16 whenever like the main part of the story takes place. Um but he goes on nightly escapades where Biddy doesn't know where he's going, and she's very worried about him um because he just randomly disappears. He comes back very tired, very hurt, and different things. And basically the story kind of kicks off when one night Rowan fails to come home, and it kind of sets off the chain of events that the story ends up following, I would say. And I don't think we should go into any more of that without spoiling the book, at least, I think. But I do think it was a very cutesy read. I think I gave it 4.5 stars, 4.75 stars, somewhere around there, because I really liked it. So I do think it is worth the read. And I do think the politics are something that you can definitely use to extract to discuss like beginner communist theory with people.
Yeah, there's definitely something there. It's not I wouldn't say it's like a like a main like it's not in your face. Like it is there, but like
Hmm.
the ultimate thing is like you're trying to get some things to happen with like the main characters, but the politics are not. They're like a sideboard theme throughout this. Like it's there, it's relevant, but it's not like the main focus. I think I ended up rating it like I think I gave it 3 because I personally I like new adult or adult fantasy. I like high fantasy, dark fantasy. Um, so I'm not too keen on historical fantasy. I kind of figured this out when we were reading like The Familiar. Like it was fine, it was okay. And then like this one, I think it's just a little bit too like juvenile for me for it to like have that payoff. It's very sweet. It's very cute. It's not a bad book by any means. It's written very well, and if you like Lee Bardugo's work, like I think you would enjoy this as well.
Hmm.
But definitely like I can see like reading this with like your kids or something. I think it's really cute.
I mean, I also love like young adult, middle grade novels. I mean, right here, besides all the Grishaverse, right above me, I have all of like the Percy Jackson, and then like I also have the series of unfortunate events all right behind me. So like middle grade, like YA is like kind of like my bread and butter. So it really like this just fits right into the genre if you like reading stuff similar to that realm. I think if you're reading like adult romances and stuff like that, like this is not going to be a book for you like objectively, you know?
No, but I think if you like Howl's Moving Castle, that sort of vibe, or like your kid likes it, this would be a good book to
Mhm.
like maybe get them onto because it's appropriate. It's everything about it is fine. There's nothing bad about it. I would say everything's age appropriate, the way it's advertised,
Mhm.
everything like you're good, you're solid.
Yes. Other than that, well, I did like our very surface level research of the author to H.G. Perry, um, where basically her Goodreads just says that like she lives in Wellington, New Zealand, that she lives with her sister, and she has rabbits, which I think can kind of make sense for like Hutchincroft's character throughout the book, and that she has a PhD in English literature from Victoria University of Wellington, and she teaches English film and media studies. So that's it. She doesn't have a very big like social media presence. I can only find a Twitter, and it's not even ran by her. It's like ran by like her public, like I don't know, like an assistant or something that just like posts updates basically about like her books and things. So again, so like for the author's politics, nothing's really there, and like no controversies as of this point too. And I just want to say too, as another full disclaimer before we get into like the meat and potatoes of our discussion, the election has not happened yet, because I know we will end up discussing the election and how it relates to American politics and things like that. And as of recording this, it's the Sunday before the election. We have no idea what's going to happen. Everything's still up in the air. By the time this is posted, I'm sure the final results will be out. So we will know who will be president for the next 4 years. So just take that for your knowledge for what we are discussing currently in relations to US politics when we do.
Yes, and also prefacing we are not liberals. We are not
Yes.
Democrats. We are communists. When we say we are Marxists, this is not like a radical liberal and like we are Marxist. We
Yes.
are on the George Soros Antifa payroll.
I
But
wish.
so that's kind of where we're coming from with this. We're going to try to give a really good, solid discussion about some of the more, I don't know, you'll see as we progress through this.
But I will say too, before we get into the spoiler zone specifically, we can talk about a few of the criticisms where some people where less than 1% of the reviews are 1 star. That's only like 40 something reviews are 1 star. So objectively, I don't think people are disliking this book. I saw lots of people where like half of the people were complaining that the beginning is super interesting and then it ends up falling flat, or vice versa. The beginning is really boring and then they end up doing nothing. So it's for the people that dislike it, it seems to be very polarizing. Nobody really agrees on what they dislike. And then somebody was also complaining that there was too much dialogue in this book, which I don't know if I necessarily even agree with that sentiment at all because
That's a really weird criticism. I don't think I've ever seen that. Or
No.
there's just too much talking. It's like, I mean, that's how you build up characters. I don't know, especially since it's first person limited, um,
It's third
like,
person, isn't it?
or yeah, it's third person limited.
Yeah, you're only following Biddy's perspective, but it's third person.
So that's all you're getting. So, like, how are you supposed to know what's going on with the characters and their motivations if they are not expressing it and it's not having multiple point of views?
That's what I didn't get either. I just thought that was a really weird criticism that I saw. So I was like, well, I guess I'll bring it up if that's what people have to critique about it. And I feel like if that's one of your main critiques of this, then maybe you don't have a very solid critique within
I
this.
want to know what else they're reading. Like,
I don't know. I didn't go into their Goodreads profiles like you do, but I
I
can
know
I can look
sometimes
at
when
their
I like fly
review.
off the handle, I'm like, well, let's see. I'll be the judge of that.
Well, because I just read it, I'm just like, okay, you guys are just stupid and don't know how to read a good book. That's fine. You know?
Yeah, that is so strange because it's not. Like, I would say, like, from just like the way it is written, the characters are built and everything, like, there's no criticism on my end. It flows well. There wasn't any like weird, funky instances where you could be like, like this is kind of written weird. Like, you could tell it was very well intentioned. Like, the
Yeah.
writing of it's fine. It's written very beautiful.
Yeah.
That's fine. It's just like for me, it was just a little bit too young. Like, I'm not super big on like coming of age stories like this. Like, but that's just like a preference. So like I'm not gonna let that completely influence my
Yeah.
opinion on it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not gonna be like, oh, it's a 1 star because she's 16. Like, that would be weird.
Yeah, I don't know. Not even anybody was really complaining about like Biddy as a kid. Like sometimes they were complaining about the characterizations, and like I think each of the characters develop really well. I do think this is a very much like all of the tropes in this book are like exactly what I look for in like my fantasy books, and you can kind of tell like if you read this like the way that it is. It's just it's very sentimental to me personally. And so I think if you have similar reading tastes to I, then you will like this book. Is how I like to say that. Because not everybody has the same taste in books. I mean, some people are given Six of Crows 1 stars and DNF in it, and they just are
It's
stupid.
because they're wrong.
Yeah. Like I don't even know what to say at that point. But other than that, I don't know if you have anything else you want to say before we go directly into spoilers.
I don't think so. I think we covered all of the bases because there's just not a whole lot because this author isn't super huge, so we don't really have
No.
anything to go off of. So we kind of have a lot of liberty to express more, and we want to spend a little bit more time talking about the politics and some more like material dialectics about the book
I
in
will
context to what some of the
say
characters said.
I was looking at her Goodreads page, and there is a book called A Declaration of the Rights of Magicians, which says a sweeping tale of revolution and wonder in a world not quite like our own. So maybe it says it's a story of genre defying magic, war, and the struggle for freedom in an early modern world. So I was thinking, I added it to my want to read, so maybe in the future we could be doing that book because it
Yeah, it's
seemed kind of
interesting.
up our alley in that way. But it is, I think, historical fiction again. So, but I don't know if it's like about the Age of Enlightenment period. So I think maybe that could be something we check out at some point.
And by we, it's
Uh,
gonna be like Kristen reads it and be like, no, you have to read this for the podcast.
yeah.
That's usually how
Well, because
these episodes end up going.
I wasn't gonna make Mariah read this book at all. I was just like, oh, like it's a really beautiful book. But then she was like, oh, well, like I don't want to do this one book for the podcast. I'd rather do something else. I'm like, okay, well, the only other thing that I could think of that we could do that's lighthearted and to discuss is The Magician's Daughter. Other than that, we were kind of fresh out of ideas. So
Yeah, pretty pretty much. We're getting to the end of the year. We have a lot of stuff logged. So
I
we're
mean,
trying to give a little bit of
yeah,
variety.
mix it up, and then I mean, and the thing is, it's like we act like this is like it just fell into our laps. Like we planned this. Like we had already planned something else to do. But Mariah thought it would be too sad if we kept talking about sad books, I guess. With murder
Pretty
and
much.
blood.
I
Which
mean, I
this
enjoy
book
it, but I like this is probably all gonna get cut out, but you
no,
know,
I keep it in, I
we
don't
just need
care. Mhm.
we just need variety. That's all we need is a little bit of variety.
And this is why
Um,
you should suggest books in the comments below if you want us to read something that's not something we typically review, too.
yeah, or shoot me an email. I know that
An
sounds like really
email.
old, but we have our literary liberation email that if anyone has anything and like we don't see the comments, even though you can just direct message on any platform. We'll see it.
Yeah, we
One of
have
us will
all of our
see it. Kristen's
messaging open.
chronically online, so
Yeah, I
somebody will
get
see it.
every notification. Anyways, so moving on to the direct spoilers of this book. I don't think we're gonna go play by play, so like if you haven't read it, we're just assuming that you have read it. Um I don't know. What else to say specifically?
Let me look. I think we're probably going to end up focusing a lot on not Biddy, but the
Rowan.
dynamic and in the like the philosophy between Morgan and Rowan. Because I think
Yes.
like their ways of handling the dilemma that is magic and how to deconstruct an oppressive system from their perspectives are vastly different and of the most value for us to discuss.
Yes. So basically, Rowan, I think he's not quite a revolutionary, I would say. It seems to me as if this author has not read any like communist work, which is like, I understand. Not a lot of people have read a lot of communist work, but it seems as if they would describe themselves more as like a leftist and like the current state of the world is something that has been radicalizing them without having the theory to back it up, which do think that is a great starting point for a lot of people, and I do think, like, after reading this, she should read Reform or Revolution by Rosa Luxemburg, and that can make the entire politics of this book, like, so much stronger, and I think it would work a lot better.
Yeah, I truly do think that if she had been a bit more principled with understanding like the colonialism, like the nuances of it, for Rowan, there would have been more like we as readers, you would get a lot more from it, and it would have been not obviously. I don't think everything will ever be up to like Babel by R. Huang, but it would
Yeah,
be close. Like, they definitely would have made it a lot stronger, and I think I would have enjoyed it a little bit more, but also it would have taken away from, like, the whimsical nature of the book. So we're gonna have to,
mhm.
like, do some leaps, some stretches here to get our points across, but also it's kind of in the book already. So we're
Yes.
not stretching too far.
Well, because, like, the main, like, of this governmental system, so like obviously there's like the British Parliament or whatever, which this book does not focus on. It focuses specifically on like the magical parliament, which I think basically mirrors, I guess, British Parliament in a similar way, where it's more representative, just like how like the American government is, where they don't really discuss how like this ministry sort of like developed. It just basically seems like it's always been there, at least around Rowan's time and stuff like that. Who Rowan specifically is a character that is discussed about growing up in poor areas and basically treated as other because of what he's experienced and not being like a privileged white man, basically.
Yeah, and you can see that with I think it's, like, in this 3rd chapter how somebody had made mention of what was it? I had it marked.
You
There
are
had never been
lagging a
an
little bit.
Irish mage. Sorry. In the 3rd chapter, there was a line where it said that there had never been an Irish mage on the British Council. I don't know how much you could know about relations between England and Ireland, but they're not good. Also, we don't really know how prevalent I think this council is in the like regular human society because it does seem like magic is very subdued, very like Harry Potter-esque. Like it's separated, the humans don't know.
Yes.
Or maybe they forgot.
Yeah, well, because like the way that magic works within this system as well, it's not like there is some like magic spells being cast and like that stuff, but it is not a typical Harry Potter sort of magic where it's like they're waving their wands and things are happening. There's different spells and stuff that are like more like concoctions, potions, more like almost like like back to the roots magic used to be like viewed as, I think, where like you can draw like a trap circle and trap your victim, or like use this concoction for this sort of thing to happen where it's not necessarily like wizard cops running around doing waving their wands and like casting a spell to like lock someone up, you know?
Yeah, the magic system in this is not like super developed and locked down in the way that like some other books that do have magic implemented in them. So I think that is a kind of a weakness because I did want to see like more of like why is magic not being accessible to everyone such a problem? Because it doesn't really get into why. It's like it
I
could
mean,
help people, but it doesn't say to like the gravity of the situation for the rest of the people. And I don't know.
well,
It just seemed like another finite resource. It was just like,
yes, like it's not
but
something that's an unlimited power like most magic is typically viewed because I think the author was definitely trying to represent more magic. Not like it's not trying to be just like this something out of nothing. It's basically almost like more like transmutation, sort of like magic, where it's like what you
like
put in it.
alchemy.
Yeah, like you, it has to be like equalness on both sides for it to happen. You know, like it can't just like appear out of nothing. And the way that the magic comes through, like the cracks in the world and stuff, to give out like basically just that little bit of like survival for the most suffering people is kind of how it was viewed to be done until you have the main like council guy Vaughn coming in and beginning to hoard all of this magical resources for himself and him drawing that power and using it for himself to be the most powerful magician in the world basically, or at least in, I guess, Europe, Britain, England, whatever area you want to refer to him being in power of.
It had to have been England. I don't
I would
remember it
assume
saying
so.
it said kept saying British, so it could be it's
I
it's
don't know
gotta be
like
like the mainland.
how far like this magic extends, but like Rowan does discuss like about how using magic can be good for the benefit of all the people, not just like the 1% basically. And I think with Rowan's ideals is a lot more against the authority that is currently holding the power, while Morgaine is somebody that's like I can work the system from inside and end up doing more good than bad, where you have Morgaine as basically like your more liberal character in that way, and then you have Rowan as your much more revolutionary character, I think.
Yeah, like Rowan as like an individual agent kind of reminds me of Lenin's older brother that ended up getting executed because he would commit acts of like terrorism against the czars. So
Mhm.
it wasn't necessarily about like the structural like takedown of like what like a monarchy is and like that from like a systemic approach, but more so like we need to just dissolve these bad guys, these bad agents. Which kind of reminded me of Rowan, which kind of with the times of it makes sense why he would act like that and there wouldn't be some
Mhm.
like collective movement within like the mages, which is very strange that there wouldn't be anyone else. He wouldn't be like rallying anyone. He just like continues to act as this one individual.
I think it's because at least like within the British one, they basically have like been shown to be very racist and very sexist and very like against otherness, like xenophobia because of like I think of Rowan's upbringing. So like he's kind of viewed as like the the vocal minority in many ways where he knows because he can directly see and like because he's grown up in poverty, he directly saw like what lack of magic does for the people around you and the suffering that it causes. And so I think that's why he's so much more like we must get this magic into the hands of the people that need it no matter any means necessary, sort of vibe. So he was doing it without people, and you would think even like people like Morgan trying to radicalize people, it obviously doesn't work. So I'm assuming it's just like because of the way that like the British power is in the book, that's why. Versus maybe if they were in like a more revolutionary era
That
too.
could be. I don't know. That was like I think one of like the weaknesses of this. I would have liked to see more about it because I definitely think there could have been like at least Morgan could have been trying to unionize them or something. That would have been really cool to see. But she
But
kind of
I
just
do
works in an
think,
office.
well, because I think one thing too that they end up discussing is that like the people that they decide to come to like the magic schooling to become mages, they're very selective in this. So this is already like the ideas of picking like the white people or like the rich people and stuff like that to come to the school to start learning like the magic and stuff. So obviously they're going to be racist, and because of like the systemic issues of that, I think that shows with who's in power in this story because
You
they
mean
do.
like, because I thought it said in the book that the mages kind of just like came into their power at the age of like whatever, like
No,
16 or
well,
17?
there was no, like, I think, like, they could, like, it depends on if they showed magical powers whenever they were younger or not, and then they basically got accepted into, like, some type of, like, schooling of some type where they could learn because, like, Morgan talks about, like, her, Rowan, and, like, whatever the other guy's name is. His name escapes me.
Storm.
Storm, yes. Where like them three, like they were kind of like a cohort of their own, like within their school and stuff like that. But Morgan specifically talks about like I don't remember when it happens in the book, but like she specifically talks about like they pick the people that go to like that become empowered because she was almost overlooked, even though she had magical powers and people wanted to deny that she has power. So I could completely see like the people that are in power completely denying other people, poor people, oppressed
Yeah.
minorities and stuff saying like, "Oh, they're not actually magic," sort of thing. But I know there was a scene where Biddy was talking to Morgan about that because it's like around whenever she talks about like Storm to Morgan and she's like, "Oh, like we all tried to be friends and stuff where it doesn't end up working out." So I can definitely see like that is why I think like just like how there's like basically no radicalization that we could do within like the US government. Like none of the US senators really, none of the House of Representatives or the president are ever going to be like radicalized beings because they're going to continue to uphold capitalism and do whatever means necessary to do that.
Yeah. And I think that's what people seem to miss when a lot of people are advocating for voting and supporting a third party member is nobody is saying that they're going to win.
No,
It's not about that. It's about them getting resources directed away from the DNC and the RNC or the GOP, so that these other parties can start to get funding and then use that funding to help radicalize and build up the masses. Like that's where we're trying to get like the funds allocated so that they can also help build up like local, like smaller communities, smaller like like well, not like it doesn't even have to be senators. It could be like different like radical mayors and stuff. So that's like the urge to push. It's like that's the only reason why you would do that,
which is like
if that
the
makes sense.
great like I have that Rosa quote in here, which I don't know if I should read. Do you think I should read it? I have
You can if you
it's
want.
We tried to show that this influence is purely imaginary. The relations between capitalist property and the capitalist state develop entirely opposite directions, so that the daily practical activity of the present social democracy loses, in that last analysis, all connection with the work of socialism. From the viewpoint of a movement for socialism, the trade union struggle for our parliamentary practice are vastly important insofar as the make socialistic the awareness of consciousness of the proletariat and help to organize it as a class. But once they are considered as instruments of the direct socialization of capitalist economy, they not lose not only their usual effectiveness, but also cease to be meaning to prepare the working class for the conflict of power. So that's Rosa Luxemburg in Reform or Revolution. Obviously, I know that quote is a very kind of confusing quote, but basically, what Rosa is saying is she discusses that creating like social like programs and social things to help the worker are not necessarily net bad things, but they can end up being bad things because people end up associating them with capitalism whenever they should be used as a means to radicalize the people to show them what socialism can do for them. So, like, for example, like Bernie Sanders, I think, was a big influence on radicalizing the youth a lot in 2016, where he basically kind of started taking away the negative connotation of a socialist, even though he is like more like a social democrat or even a democratic socialist at like the furthest you could call him. But like their ideals are good, but in the end, it ends up prolonging capitalism in many ways because people are basically content with the suffering because they do still receive few benefits whenever we should be using that to radicalize the people to be like, hey, like these few benefits that you're getting could be tenfold if you actually like join the revolution and fight back against your oppressors.
Yes, and I think you can kind of see that. At least I can see in my workplace. I worked in a memory care facility that was really bad. We were treated horribly. We were overworked. Our ratios were awful. And there, it was so much easier to at least get people on your side and like the aims for like unionizing or a much bigger prospect where I work now because it's paid better. That conversation never happens. Like I try to pick people's brains and whatnot. And so like it's a very small example, but you can definitely tell in different instances of people having more privileges versus being like severely oppressed. This is not me advocating for accelerationism. I need to preface that.
Yes,
But
we
just
do not.
saying that, like, it's hard to get people on that same mindset when they are given these things. They're like, okay, it's fine now. Like, I'm okay. I was like, but you could have so much more. Why not continue to want more?
And that's like with like that's why I think Reformer Revolution is a great read, especially for like beginner leftists. If you call yourself a leftist, this is a I'm hateful. Call yourself communist or you're not. You're either a lib or you're a communist in that way. Like you're not leftist does not mean anything else in my opinion. If you're co-opting it's become such a huge problem in that way where I think not to rant too much about it, but I do think it is a very frustrating stance that people have where people are like, well, if Kamala gets elected, we'll have some benefits where I won't lose my rights, blah, 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 whenever they don't even understand or comprehend that people are currently still losing their rights, no matter who is in power overall in the United States.
It's true because it will never be like advantageous for these politicians to promote anything that's going to benefit the working class when their interests are in favor of the economic ruling class because they're going to keep having them be in these positions to maintain their position as a like career politician. Like that's how
Yes.
they're making their money. That's who that benefits them in the long run.
But, like, that's not saying either that we're, like, against, like, oh, like, I think Kamala's, $6,000 tax credit, if it's just, like, a straight tax credit that she wants to do for families with children, $6,000, I think that is beneficial, and that could help radicalize some people. If they see that, like, oh, like, $6,000 per child a year, that's super helpful for me and my family. Whenever you can view that into a socialistic lens where you end up viewing that where it's like, "Oh, yeah, like, if the workers were actually in power, you actually wouldn't have to worry about that extra fucking $6,000 because you would just have your needs met."
Yeah, especially I think when you think of like we're so off topic, but like I guess
Well,
not
I think it's
really.
relevant it's
Like it's
relevant to the book.
relevant. We have to make the case. And it's just like you got to think. You would I think it
I
your
think
federal tax dollars, right, are going into this. Like your tax dollars directly are funding the war in it's not even a war, the genocide in Gaza and other wars, right? That like the US is using to just maintain its power, its domination over other countries, just like global like the influence and whatnot. Like your federal tax dollars are like that. So why would you want to keep putting money into this system, right? Instead of trying to like work your way up and change it so like it's like the taxes, like the whole tax system. People are like tax the rich. That's how we fix the system, but it's still going to fund like the military industrial complex and whatnot.
like, just because we're
You know what I
paying less
mean?
in
Like we
taxes
shouldn't want to
doesn't
like
mean other
tax
people aren't.
rebates.
Yeah.
Like it's great and all, but it's like your money still went to be used for these things.
And even if it's not your money, it's still somebody else's money that is still, like, directly like, the problem is too, I don't think a lot of Americans realize, and like that's how like I can relate it to like Morgan, where she thinks like, oh, like working from the inside, like this is how we fix it. We become the change that we want to see. And it's like at a certain point, you cannot be the change that you want to see because it's just not there. Like with the way
Yeah,
that
especially when
Morgan
she says
works.
like, "Yeah, I watched like all of these majors get killed for less."
Yeah. And it's
So it's
like,
just
and you
like,
didn't do
"Girl,
anything about it? Like, it's just like,
I
I tried.
couldn't.
Mm, she
You're
tried
white
to do
womaning right
something,
now."
yeah. And so I think and then, like, I think the book does a really great job at being very critical of her too, because like, Biddy and Rowan are never on her side in that way. They're like, "No, like, you should have died for, like, these people. You should have died for the cause, because like, that's, like even though, like, Rowan is a little impulsive and a little bit, like, crazy, goofy doing stuff that maybe he shouldn't be doing. He's still I think he actually has his heart in the right place where he's trying to do what he can because he knows what it's like to be the most oppressed. And yes, Morgan, as a woman, a very sexist area, she knows what it's like to be oppressed, but it's also like very much not the same as what it is for
No, not
actual
at
oppressed
all.
minorities, you know? Like, you're still in a very privileged spot, and you just wanted to keep that privileged spot, is what that ideal is, and I think that's the idea of most Americans are very much like Morgans, where, like, you say that you want change, but w working change through the system is never going to work because, like, the overheads, the people in charge can still extract from you, and they're still going to use that for their benefit, no matter which way
It's
you
gonna be like a lot of liberals are putting forth that idea of like, "Oh, we gotta put on our oxygen mask first before we, like, put on everyone else's." It was like, "But do you know where the
Why?
plane is going?"
Yeah,
It's like, I don't think people realize if they don't like study, like, I don't expect anyone to have like an autistic hyperfixation like me, where I study like CIA covert operations, where you see like what happened in Indonesia, or you see what happened in Guatemala and Argentina. This horror, or Chile, like what the United States government has done to people is
yeah,
abysmal. What is happening to the people in Gaza right now because of US taxpayer like money, it is despicable. I don't know
and
how people can see like this is not a hard line for people when you actually see what has happened historically and what is happening right now. It's very difficult to have these conversations, and I hope that if we do have like liberal listeners, this will at least like you'll be able to understand our positioning. You won't just like demean us and say like we're voting for Trump. I'm not, but like I can't in good faith, as somebody who lives in a solid blue state,
yeah. I live in a solid
not
red state.
afford to give my vote to somebody who could use the funding and we can start moving and looking past like 4-year increments of the future. Like
Yeah,
we're thinking very big picture here, not just the next 4 years. Like
yeah, I
building our
think
community is the priority.
yeah, because one day and whether or not all of this falls to, like, a true communist revolution or we fall completely into a fascist dictatorship, I think either way with the direction of the country, it's going to end up one way or the other. That's just like there's no slowing down fascism by voting for Kamala or like at least under Kamala we have light fascism. The direction that this country is moving, no matter which way you slice it, it's going far right and far like we're almost Hitler level esque. Like at one point with what they're doing to people in Gaza and what they have done to other people around the world, they're going to continue this until there's nobody left to oppress, and then it'll be you.
I don't think people realize is like the techniques and whatnot that are happening to the people of Gaza, like that will get implemented elsewhere. Like this is not just
Yeah.
a one-off experience. This
No,
will
and it's already
continue.
continuing versus Israel's strike continuing to strike on Lebanon right after like Palestinians are all almost completely dead. There's been 200,000 deaths in Palestine and there's virtually nowhere to live at all. Then once they've done sieging Palestine, they're moving on to the next country to expand Greater Israel. And that's how it's going to keep moving just for the United States to have a strong semblance of power within the Middle East because they will be the Middle East at that point.
It's really scary. It's scary to think about and look at, but this is why we use books like this so we can at least have some sort of platform to discuss it in the context of the book. Because although, like, sure, Rowan wasn't like organized, he was doing more, in my opinion, for the people than
Yes, the
Morgan
actually
was
suffering,
within
yeah.
the inside. He was
Yeah,
doing
big
the feeding. He was doing like the mutual aid.
yeah, he was going in and stealing what artifacts he could to go help the people in poverty, the people suffering, the people sick and dying because of Vaughn specifically choosing to hoard all of the magic for himself. For what? For literally what? Because
Exactly. And then
he was
Morgan being like, "Oh, well, he's actually doing more harm than good by like stealing these things." Is like, but he's not. He's like directly. This is like direct
yeah,
action, direct support to the masses in the
yeah.
ways that he can.
Because obviously, whenever you're just one person, you can't do that much. Yes, we recognize that. But all of these people saying, I'm just one person, I can't change the world. If all of those one people got together and actually like built up their areas and discussed this and worked with their fellow man, it would outweigh the people that are doing the evil.
That's why I don't get because liberals will, like, condemn mutual aid for being, like it's like they're going out and feeding people. Right now, like, our Siskiyou Mutual Aid is trying to get, like, coats and jackets and hats and whatnot because it's getting really cold, so to in order to help the unhoused people, which if you don't know, I live in Southern Oregon, I live very close. It actually, like, how homelessness is criminalized where I'm at, but it happened in Josephine County where the Supreme Court case happened, which is, like, 20 minutes away from me. Where
Not to dox
homelessness isn't
yourself.
criminalizing. Yeah, it's fine. It's a big enough county. Like Southern Oregon is huge, but I live where criminal like being unhoused
Mhm.
is a criminalizing offense. They have nowhere to go. They get evicted from
And
their tents.
you live in a blue
I
state. How is that?
do.
How is that?
I It's scary because I think of like how if this is like the pinnacle of the United States,
Yeah.
what is happening elsewhere?
Well, because that's the idea too, is that like, oh, like with the liberals with their whole vote blue no matter who, you look at a completely blue state like Oregon that has like a blue governor, blue whatever else. I'm sure pretty much all your state
Tina
representatives are
Kotek, though,
blue.
by the way.
Well, that's what
She's
I'm saying
awful.
is that like all of the people that work within Oregon are blue, but yet you're still having these fascist policies implemented in these states. So it's almost like the liberals are fascists too.
Meanwhile, it's like, yeah, we have ranked choice voting on the measures this year. We have um another like tax on the rich. Like these are great things. However, there's still really bad things happening here that people want to kind of just brush off because it's a blue state.
And that's why like those things are so important to vote on, and me and Mariah have never advocated for not voting. Every single year, whatever election is going on, I vote every year. No matter what. Even if it's local election, whatever. I'm voting every single year. You can watch me. I have the day pretty much off because the kids that I watch don't have school, so I end up watching them all day and I take them with me to go vote. That is what I do. And so in no way are me and Mariah ever advocating not to vote. That has never been a sentiment that I think most communists even hold too, because they do understand that these ideals can radicalize the masses. Like just these basic things, like you look at like the legalization of marijuana. Obviously it's still not legalized where I am, but it's becoming more the norm where you have red states all around us beginning to legalize it, or there's even just an option to vote on it. And those are just like the basis of human rights that we need to definitely start implementing, but they should be ideals to radicalize you, not just like, oh, like, well, once we get this, I have nothing else to worry about. Because
Yeah,
there will
that's why
always
we
be.
say that there's no means like voting isn't going to yield systemic changes that we need to end this class-based society that we live under. Like it's not going to affect the base, but it is affecting the superstructure just marginally enough to at least get people on the same side, especially as people in the imperial core and us like facing detrimental effects of the climate crises. We have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable because the only way that things are going to get better despite how bad it may be here, it's getting worse for people in other places. There's droughts,
Mm,
there's famines, hurricanes are getting worse. It's horrible, but we are living in the most privileged, one of the most privileged
nation.
countries. I would say
Yeah,
the most privileged country in the United or in
I would
the
have to
world,
agree.
based on like how much exploitation of other like the periphery that we do, so that we can gain. It's like so we have to embrace a degrowth like mindset and all of this. It's not going to get better until it gets worse. And we have to be okay with relying on our neighbors and understanding that just voting, like Kamala Harris is not going to fix this.
I have a quote, another Rosa quote, if I may, that I feel like is
Yeah,
very
you're
important
good.
today.
I know we're like getting really like hyped up, but this is like Chris and I talk about this literally every day, and it's so
I think
frustrating.
and that's what's so great about this book is that I feel like this book is like the best means we've actually had to really go in and talk about theory as well, too. Like
Yeah,
even
for a
though
really
it is
long time we
very
haven't been able to apply it.
surface level book, and I think that's why I think like if you have children or anybody who is younger or like in high school, sit them down and read this book and then you can discuss with them like just I think Rosa's specific work, Reform or Revolution, is such a great like analysis that you can like literally do like a book club with these two books side by side, because I also have this quote too, which like talking about like Rowan working and doing things on his own. It says, only when the great mass of workers take the keen and dependable weapons of scientific socialism in their own hands will all the petty bourgeois inclinations, all the opportunistic currents come to naught. The movement will then find itself on sure and firm ground. Quantity will do it. I think that is so like that is literally just showing, and like I think so many people like that's why like communists and like people on the left stress so hard being in your community, talking to your neighbors and stuff, because the more people you have on your side, there's more of us than there are of them, objectively.
And this is why it's so important to read the theory. And I know there's so many people that are staunchly like supporting anti-intellectualism because they're like, I don't know what this says. It's like you have to apply yourself. There's a reason that in every single communist movement around the world that has ever happened, literacy rates and reading and education are the priority.
Yes. Like,
That is like if you look at any sort of like revolutionary project that has happened, teaching people how to read has been the priority so that they can also educate themselves and educate each other. Like
but
there's a reason
unfortunately,
for that.
and then this is also ends up being a systemic issue to why people are so anti-intellectualist in the United States, because most Americans do not have a reading level above 8th grade. Most Americans do not have a reading level above 8th grade. And of course, I would say that Rosa Luxemburg's writing is obviously more advanced than an 8th grader level. But that is why, and that's why there's so many places on YouTube, online. We have here where we talk about books and relate it to that, or even on YouTube where people are reading the theory and they are discussing it as they read it out loud to you. And that's like something that I think, even if you're not somebody that's like, if you're just even a beginning, I just think one book every couple months. That's all you have to do.
I mean, that's all we did in the beginning of the
Yeah.
pandemic. We would get together once a week, we would discuss, like, a chapter or section from Marx on our little Discord server, and we would help each other and grow, like, we just found it that was, like, one of, like, the most, I think, enlightening things that we had from the pandemic to happen, was our ability to, like, meet other people who were like-minded, and we were helping each other grow and learn more and understand the theory
I mean,
as
and
best
that's,
we could with the tools that we had.
and no offense to Mariah, but that's ended up what radicalized Mariah. Mariah would be a vote blue no matter who Democrat right now if it weren't for that.
I it's crazy like how far it's come. Like I remember being on Discord like chats and stuff and there would be like a tab because I remember Kristen like making fun of me for this because it had like what is proletariat? Because I was like, what the fuck does this mean? I had never heard of it before living in like my rural like I live in the middle of like fucking nowhere, it feels like. It's not the
Yeah.
smallest town, but it's not big. I'd never heard that. I'd never heard it in a history class or anything, and we read like the Communist Manifesto, and it all like started from there. And there's just
Yeah.
so many more options now than like we had, like learning, like hearing Richard Wolff's speeches, or even like if you listen to old like Angela Davis or Parenti speeches, like they talk in such a
Easy
motivating
way.
way, and it's
Yeah.
so
It's so
digestible. Even if you like
concise.
Zizek is great. It's a really great tipping point. And obviously I don't think it should end there. Even like Hassan. I know I have like my
Yeah.
critiques of Hassan, but he has done so much for people since like the Young Turks when I remember seeing him back in like 2016 when he would post
Yeah.
on like Facebook back of the Young Turks. He's just come so far and has developed so much and has gotten such a huge following, like being such a big Twitch supporter. Like these are mainstream ideas, and we urge everyone that I know like escapism and book talk has been. It's great that people are reading, but you have to start reading the nonfiction. Like it is not an option, it's not a luxury. It is critical to understanding your material conditions so that we can free ourselves from the chains of oppression. I sound like
Yeah.
Squidward in that line, but you know, he was spitting bars in that
We must
unionizing episode.
dismantle this system board by board.
Quite literally.
But
Um, sorry, I know we got really off track. And we're hitting like the hour mark, I think. We've just
so
had a lot of like pent up rage. We see a lot of this online, and I'm excited for all of these like hobby political accounts to die down so we can just get back to
yes.
grinding and radicalizing the masses.
Yeah, unfortunately, right now it's a really horrible time to be on political TikTok. Because normally I
I
feel
know,
like
I
it's
got
like
called a Trump
pretty,
supporter.
What?
Yeah, I've been called like a Trump supporter, or somebody said that I sounded like a Zionist because of how I talked about something.
What?
Make it make sense. I have no idea. I have been seeing the craziest takes. I was like, I need to stop, and I
I
will wait
saw
2 days.
I saw a video in on TikTok earlier today. It was Bisan's video that she actually, I don't know if she posted it today or the other day or something, but it was her where she was talking about the election going on in America, and she talked about how like whoever gets elected does not only affect America, even though you view like, oh, we're putting our oxygen mask on first. It doesn't only affect America; it affects the entire geopolitical world of whoever gets elected president. And so then she starts interviewing Ghazians and Palestinians about like who would they want to be president, and they're like, we don't give a fuck. We're getting genocided either way, no matter who you pick. So if that's what you guys want to support, that's your business. Nobody goes into the voting booth with you and tells you which way to go. That's like it's all up to you. But I do encourage you that if you are so staunch on voting blue this election because this is the most important election of our lives, I do not want you to hear that same sentiment 4 years from now, that being the most important election from our lives. Because they can't all be the most important election of our lives. I'm sorry. That's literally not how that works. Maybe pick a different
It's
version.
been like this since, like, I
Hillary
remember
Clinton.
how scared people were in, like, the year 2000, and then 2016 when people were voting. I remember that because that was, like, my first big election. Like, everyone's like, "We have to vote for Hillary," and you know what? She still won the popular vote, but because of the electoral college system, which has a notorious history of not actually representing what people in the United States want, like,
Yes.
collectively, because of the point system, it is set up for failure. It is an intentional system to not represent your vote. This is why people are so demoralized and they don't actually participate in the elections all the time. Like, there's a reason that I don't even know if 50% of people vote in our general elections at this point. Maybe
I don't know
60
what
on
the
a good
percentage
year.
is.
It's
I
not a
mean, it's
lot. It
definitely
used to only
not
be like
locally.
half.
Not locally at all. I know presidential elections usually will get more people out and going to vote, but I think the problem is too, just like with like the American voting system too, is that like people are so disillusioned about where they live. Like obviously, like I live in Kentucky, so I get a lot of people on Kentucky like within my social media pages because I tag like where I live. And so I get a lot of like on threads, I'll get a lot of people like, "Oh, from Kentucky and just like voted." And then they'll have like a blue heart representing that they voted blue. And I'm like, you talk about me throwing away my vote for voting for third party when you're voting for Kamala Harris in Kentucky. Of all states where Donald Trump got 2 times the amount of votes as Joe Biden did in the United States, and Kentucky has not been blue since 1992, 1996 or something because of Clinton, because of before all of like that stuff going on, all because like Clinton is from the South and that is how he won like a lot of the southern states. Saying that like you're actively telling me you're throwing away your vote because you do not understand the electoral college at all. Like
And
these are
also,
the
like, this
places that
isn't
you
like
should
a
be strategically
moralizing thing.
voting.
But, like, understand how, like, redistricting plays into this. Understand how, like, all of this there's just so much to understand about the electoral college system, and, like, we're not just saying, like, talking out our ass. Like, this is just something that we have, like, fixated on because of our neurodivergency, and, like,
Yeah.
you can see the patterns. That's, like, the one thing with having, like, autism is you're very easily able to pick up, like, patterns. Pattern recognition is a thing. So, like, Kristen and I don't know if we've
Yeah.
ever actually said this on the podcast. We are certainly not neurotypical. Um,
Oh, we
however,
definitely
we're very
mentioned earlier autistic.
attuned to it. Like, there is like more to it than just like the theories. Like, you can see like things are wrong and there's certain variables. Like,
Yes.
it lines up with what like Marxist theory says, and it's so frustrating when people don't want to listen. And it's like, I have a strong sense of justice, but it's also backed. It's backed
Yeah, that's
by the books that I
facts and
read.
logic. But also
Facts and
feelings, because
logic.
that's also like what like Marxist theory talks about, because like existing within like the world is more than just like straight facts and like things like that. Like feelings influence everything. And that is why like we have like so many issues as well within times, because like you have like your Republicans saying like I only believe facts and logic blah blah blah, which is not true. They believe their feelings on it, but then it's almost like a negative connotation to like follow your heart and doing
There's
what you
nothing
think is
wrong with,
morally
like,
right.
loving the people in your community and wanting the best for everyone around you. That is, like, object and I would say, like, that's such a revolutionary sentiment. I think Huey P. Newton maybe talked about this in Revolutionary Suicide, don't quote me on it, but, like, you have to love the people around you and, like, learn even though, like, despite the differences, like, I live next to a lot of Trumpies and whatnot, and I just get so frustrated, like, hearing them talk because I know that they just aren't educated in the same way that I am, so I am, like, trying my best to talk to the people around
It's
me
so hard,
without, like,
especially
getting that switch of, like, Red Scare. Like, because
well
it
because
just
like
turns on so quick if you say the wrong thing. It's just like, "I
yes.
love you, and I want the best for you. I want you to have healthcare. I don't want you to struggle through life."
And that's what the crazy thing is too, like, especially live in Kentucky, so, like, family members of mine are Trump supporters, and, like, obviously, like, living in the South, you're going to encounter Republicans, and that's just a fact of life. But I will have so many conversations with these people that are staunch Trump supporters, having the Trump sign in their yard, flying the Trump flag from the back of their cars, and I will talk to them like one on one about like workers' rights and what like is best for us as a collective, and they will sit there and agree with you 100% because of Red Scare propaganda and like the whole thing about communism. If you just don't like mention certain words, then they will be completely on your side and fully understand what you are saying too.
Yes, and obviously we're coming at this as white folk, so we're able
Yes.
to have a lot of these conversations. Like, would I necessarily talk about this with, like, scary white men? Maybe not. I would leave that to, like, my partner.
Yeah.
But, like, there's some instances where, like, we can utilize that privilege, like, where you have it so you can have these conversations and still maintain, like, a level of safety.
Yes. But I mean, see, did you really think we were going to get a big electoral politic
No,
discussion out of this
I'm
little book?
tired. I'm tired of seeing it on the internet, and it's not like and it sucks, like, 'cause that's just like, I have to keep seeing it, but I'm also I'm tired of seeing dead children on my Instagram. Every day I log in and I see how bad things are for the people of Gaza, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. Like, you can see it all, like, on I can't pronounce his name, Motaz will repost videos from people that he knows that are still in, like, northern Gaza, southern Gaza, like, wherever they are, and, like, it's horrible. It is absolutely gut-wrenching, and it's getting to the point where I'm, like, desensitized from seeing it, so I can imagine people who are living through it, what they're seeing every day, hearing bombs go off. It is
Yes.
horrible, and we have a platform, and we are utilizing a platform, and I know this is going up after the election, and nothing we can say will change what's happening. It's all the balls are in
No.
motion. People are already voting. It's too late. However, we can
It's
still
not
keep
too
looking
late for
forward to the future.
yes. It's never too
That's what
late
we're
to work
saying.
within your community to even after you go home and go out and vote for Kamala on Tuesday or Trump, whoever you choose to vote for, whatever you believe, third party. It doesn't stop you from going and building community with your neighbors or your
Yes,
other
that
people
shouldn't be
within your
the end
area.
of anyone. Like, if you are feeling so passionate about politics right now, keep the ball rolling, keep it going. You have to keep advocating for what you want because you can't go on the internet and demoralize people who are critical of your candidate and then, like, just stop doing anything and only participating in elections every 4 years. There's more to it. Even if it's just like financially donating to mutual aid, whether it is to people in Gaza or people in your local community, keep Narcan on you. Share a meal with your neighbor, or if you have extra food and you see somebody, ask them if they want a meal. Keep water bottles in your car. There's like so many little things you can do that could make a world of difference that just seems so small.
And I will even say, like, as much as, like, the younger people want to hate on Facebook so much, there are so many buy nothing groups that are within your community that I see people posting all the time, like, "Hey, I made too much of dinner. If anybody wants to stop by or anything like that, like, I'll have, like, a meal ready for you to go if you need something to eat, if you don't feel like cooking or anything like that." Or there's even just, like, our neighborhood, Facebook page for, like, my specific neighborhood. We go on there and we talk about, like, oh, like people's missing pets and things like that. Like you can literally just start so small of joining like your local neighborhood group or your local city group of a buy nothing group and just doing something on there where you could even just be like, hey, like this is something that I have that's no use to me. to helpful to someone else. And that's just a great way to start, whether it's donating clothes. I see so many people donating like their old infant clothing to like in need parents and things like that, where you could do that from the comfort of your own home posting on Facebook.
Yes, you really can't like, it's really cool, like, to see, like, Facebook groups as, like, abysmal as Facebook can be. Like,
Yes.
it's a pretty good tool. Like, would I recommend organizing on it? No, don't make, like,
No.
a revolutionary Facebook page, but if you wanna, like, get together, we have, I think a group that started maybe on Facebook is called Judy's Midnight Diner, and a couple times a week, they have, like, this food truck I think they just invested in, and they go to parks and they help feed the unhoused people. So, like, they're getting funds, they're getting food, they're passing out whatever they can to help people in their community. Like, it can grow. It just takes commitment to it, and I know a lot of us are kind of burning the candle at both ends. A lot of us are working too much, and we're not getting paid enough. And if you can't go out and do that, that's fine. Talk to your coworkers, see if you can unionize or at least debate for better pay. Like, if you can't
Yeah.
properly unionize, like, at least, like, find a way to help the people who you are working with.
And if you do have a union and you have like your bosses or whoever higher up saying like, "Oh, the union's not going to help you. They're just going to take your money, blah blah blah." Do not listen to them.
You know what? Because all they're gonna do is give you a pizza party and say that you're a family. Like, "We're
Yeah.
a family, you don't need to unionize," is,
Can
like,
I
the
send
meme
you
that has been going around.
that costume?
Yeah, that was good. That
Yeah.
was, like, the pinnacle of, like, what used to happen, with my
Yeah.
partner who worked at a lumber mill. Like, they would do that, like, "Oh, we're a family. Here's your food that we're catering. Also, go work in the 120-degree weather, and we're not gonna pay you enough, means of subsistence."
Yeah. All
It's
right.
crazy. But thanks for listening to this crazy episode. The next one that's gonna go up, I think, is
Night
Night
bitch.
Bitch. It's finally happening. It should be going up
Yes.
right before the movie. I don't know what the date is.
Yes.
I don't remember. But so keep an eye out. We will be posting. I will be posting on
The movie
Instagram. I
comes
didn't
out
need to look up.
December 6th.
So
So I
it'll be
believe we're
like the
posting
week
on
I
the
think
29th.
before.
I think we're posting.
Yeah, Thanksgiving. Or day after Thanks. No, it's the 28th.
Yes.
Maybe
Yes.
day after
Yes.
Thanksgiving. I think it's gonna go up on a
Yes.
Friday because we'll probably be busy.
I
But
might, if I can schedule it beforehand, it should be up fine.
it's gonna be good. It's gonna be.
That I think we'll
Keep an
have
eye
another
out.
great political discussion. Probably more about like the patriarchy in general, though.
I'm sure how we're gonna be able to like do it in the context of our election. Who
Yeah,
knows what's gonna happen between now and then.
we still don't know again. So,
So when
um,
you're hearing this, we're blind react.
well, other than that, thanks for listening. Check out our other episodes. We shouted out like the Six Crows episodes. We did all of the Grishaverse and individual videos. So even if you haven't read like Shadow and Bone, you can just do the Six Crows. Or if you've only read Shadow and Bone, you can just do Shadow and Bone. But other than that, I think that's pretty much all we have for this month.
Yeah,
So
thanks for listening.
thank you and good night.